So I wanted to see how hard modern DisplayPort VR headsets are to actually run compared to Quest 3 Link. Because after my last video about latency, a lot of people were talking about the trade-offs between wireless VR, Link and DisplayPort VR. And once you go back to a proper DisplayPort headset, the first thing you notice is how little latency there is for me. Everything just feels more direct, more immediate, and more connected to your head movements. So I tested Quest 3 Link, the Bigscreen Beyond and the Crystal Super, and I used matching render resolutions. And to make this worst case scenario, I thought, well, let's run Assetto Corsa EVO at ultra settings. This is on a 5090, but even this game brings the 5090 to its knees in VR at any type of resolution really. And before anyone asks, I didn't record the benchmarks directly in the PC because of the recording overheads. It would have just completely skewed the frame consistency results I was looking for. So the numbers were captured separately from the gameplay footage. So first up, the Quest 3. The Quest 3 Link was rendered at roughly 2720 by 2976 per eye. That works out at around 16 million rendered pixels in total. For a comparison, a 4K screen is about 8.3 million pixels, so you're basically rendering two 4K displays in real time in VR in EVO at ultra settings. So at this resolution, the Quest 3 was pretty much pinned to its refresh rate, except like at the start when you're on the grid. But the important number was the 1% low is what I was looking for. The Quest landed around 58 FPS for its 1% lows. And then I switched over to the Bigscreen Beyond, and first I matched the render resolutions closely as I could. At basically the same pixel count, the Beyond immediately started producing better frame consistency. The Beyond was landing around about 65 FPS for its 1% lows, so around 12% better frame consistency at basically the same render resolution. And visually, even at the same resolution, the Beyond, I think, still looked noticeably cleaner than the Quest 3. Not because it's rendering more, but because there's no compression, no decompression, and the micro OLED panels, which are really small, look incredibly sharp in motion. The image simply looked more solid overall. So then I thought, oh okay, I'll start increasing the Beyond resolution to see if I can get down to the same frame consistency. I pushed it all the way to full native resolution in the end, 3560 by 3560, and that's over 25 million pixels rendered in total, compared to the Quest 3 at around about 16 million. So the Beyond was rendering roughly 56% more pixels before it finally landed in the same consistency as the Quest Link. And that's kind of insane really. And then I moved over to the Crystal Super. I matched that roughly to the same render load as the Beyond, around 3588 by 3580 per eye. And interestingly, SteamVR actually seemed to perform better than Pimax VR in my testing. So runtimes clearly matter a lot in these headsets. But visually, this is where it gets quite interesting. At these lower render resolutions, the Crystal Super already started looking pretty jaggy, whereas the Beyond still looked pretty good. And I think that really shows just how important micro OLED pixel density actually is. Because even though both headsets were rendering similar pixel counts, the Beyond still looked dramatically sharper in motion. So I think there were a few big takeaways from all of this. If your PC can already run a Quest 3 at high resolutions, then there's a really good chance it can already run a modern display headset too. And once you remove video compression, encoding, decoding and the whole streaming pipeline, you suddenly free up a surprising amount of GPU headroom. And if your headset's already pinned at its native refresh rate, that extra headroom can then go into a higher render resolution, higher graphic settings, or just better frame consistency overall. But this also showed me something else. Not all DisplayPort headsets scale equally. The Beyond was incredibly efficient because of those micro OLED panels, whereas the Crystal Super clearly needs way more brute force and resolution to really shine. So I think a lot of people using a Quest 3 for high-end PC VR are probably closer to a modern DisplayPort VR headset than they actually realise. Let me know what headset you're running, and if you're wondering whether your potato PC can run modern DisplayPort headsets, then it probably can, with ease. You may need to match the render resolutions properly though. Anyway, that's enough from me. As usual, thanks for watching, take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you soon.